Hey guys, we have an August update that came out from Behavior on Dead by Daylight. It's got a couple changes in it. I just want to spend a little bit of time to go through it and talk to you about the things that I'm seeing in here, give you some of my initial thoughts on them, and just kind of talk about them and go through some of the stuff. There are two big killer perk changes, one survivor perk change. They talk about the clown being kill switched, and then the survivor blood point bonus. So those are kind of the things on the docket. So we're just going to hop right in. This probably won't be as long as some of our other videos, but I do think it's worth going over and talking about a little bit. Um, so right here, behavior just talks about the fact that, hey, we did a huge perk overhaul as part of the July update, which was absolutely massive. It made pretty substantial changes to the game. And they've been keeping an eye on certain perks and want to change perks and make sure that um, perks that are really jumping up in popularity uh, aren't overtaking the game and pushing it in an unfun way. As far as I can tell, that's kind of what it seems like they're going for, right? Um, and the first perk that they bring up, which is a killer perk, is Thanophobia, and I think this is an incredibly important perk. I think that this perk has been uh, very impactful in games. I have been playing a good bit of Survivor with our community nights, so I've seen it in action both on the Survivor side. I've seen it in action on the killer side. Um, and since the July update, this perk has been a problem. Um, for those of you that aren't aware with the July update, generator repair times went from 80 seconds to 90 seconds, so an extra 10 seconds per generator. Thanophobia was also buffed. At max ranked before the update, Thanophobia provided a 20% reduction in action speed, which included repairing generators. So repairing generators took you longer. As part of the July update, it went from 20% at max rank with everybody affected to 22%. So every stack of Thanophobia went from slowing down actions by 5% to 5.5%, which doesn't sound like a lot on the surface, but when you combine that buff with the 10% base increase speed and generator repair time, or the 10% increase, or the 10-second increase to generator repair times, it became a really, really big deal. And Thanophobia just started feeling horribly oppressive, especially on killers like Legion and Plague, who are typically the best at injuring survivors and keeping them in the injured state. So, what is behavior doing about this? How are they changing it? What are the things that are going to be going on with the August update? Well, instead of doing the 5% penalty per survivor, it is getting nerfed down to 1, 1.5, or at max rank 2% per survivor. So what? 2, 4, 6, 8% if all 4 survivors are injured. So the base percentage has been nerfed substantially to the point where it's going to be significantly weaker than it was before. But what they've also added is that if all 4 survivors, so if you have injuries on everybody, if you have them dying, hooked, or injured, Thanophobia grants an additional 12% penalty to survivor action speeds. So what you're doing is you're not going from 2, 4, 6 to 8, you're going 2, 4, 6, 20%, which is a substantial change. What this means is that Thanophobia is going to be a lot weaker with just 1 or 2 survivors injured, but it's going to be significantly, or it's going to feel really good still if you have all 4 survivors injured. This becomes a perk that you really want to play around more, but it's not a perk that is going to be as oppressive even with just 1 or 2 survivors injured. If you want to check out the math, and I'll zoom in on this, and probably move my camera for it too, won't I? So let's take a look at what this means, right? So we have our base generator repair time. So before the July update, it was taking 80 seconds. After the July update, it's taking 90 seconds. And then after this nerf that's coming out, it's still going to take 90 seconds. So we have the base generator repair time in seconds up here. Then we have the Thanophobia slowdown per stack. Before the big update, it was 5%. After July, it became 5.5%. And then now it's going to turn into 2% per survivor with a 4-stack bonus. And if we look at kind of what this looks like per time, generators go up about 4 seconds per stack, which makes sense. This is pretty simple math right here. So with all 4 survivors injured, it's going to take you 96 seconds. With 3 survivors injured, it takes about as much time to repair a generator before the big update as it does baseline now. So this was good. I mean, Thanophobia still had good value before, but what we were seeing is that with the July update, once you increase that base, and that half percentage, we start seeing a significant time increase on the amount of time it takes for survivors to manage generators. And even with just 1 or 2 stacks, you're getting pretty good value out of it, right? Um, because it doesn't take any effort to injure a survivor. If you're playing a good killer game, you're probably always going to have one survivor injured, hooked, or dying. Like, you'll probably always be in that state unless you're really far behind. So just getting that extra 5% on every generator is pretty valuable. And then once you start getting to 2 or 3, it starts to really get out of control. Having to spend closer to 2 minutes than 1 minute to repair a generator is pretty rough. And then 4 stacks is just, it's just oppressive. Um, this is really bad. This is very difficult. And what makes this rough and where I like the change is that bumping it down still doesn't feel good, right? Going from about 110 seconds to about 105 seconds doesn't feel great. These both feel awful, right? So how is this affecting the new perk? Well, it's still pretty effective, especially if you consider where Thanophobia is compared to where it was before the July update, right? 1 stack of Thanophobia now is still equivalent to about 3 stacks of Thanophobia before the July update. So you're still, getting something out of it. The growth is really, really bad. You need to get 3 stacks of Thanophobia to get close to 4 stacks before the July update. But what we really see and where we really see the value of the perk now is in getting every survivor injured. Because all of a sudden it jumps back up to this really oppressive number, which is about equivalent. The big thing is that now you're giving survivors, I think, a more impactful counterplay because these first 3 stacks don't matter as much, right? The 3rd stack now is about equivalent to the 1st stack before this nerf coming out. So what you're experiencing right now with Thanophobia, that's about 3 stacks, okay? And so what it means is that for survivors to really manage and counter Thanophobia, it's not so much important that every survivor is spending a bunch of time healing and keeping themselves up and keeping themselves topped off. It's important that for a group of survivors, 1 survivor is healthy. If 1 survivor is healthy, you severely limit the impact of the perk. You're still being affected by it. You're still getting up to 5 seconds of extra repair time, which is, not nothing. But as long as 1 survivor manages this, you're okay. I like this for non-Swifts because it means that just 1 person needs to really worry about healing, and then you can kind of keep Thanophobia in control. Obviously, with Swifts, you can organize a little bit better, so Swifts are always going to be stronger against pretty much any perk. But I still see myself as a killer. I still see this being very valuable on Plague and Legion, which is probably where you saw Thanophobia the most, because it's easiest to get up to this point. I think Thanophobia is going to be a lot less common on a lot of other killers, which I think that if a perk feels great on every killer, I think that's a bit of a problem. I think that you should want to take different perks, but I also think you should feel enabled to take other perks. I think that this will make Thanophobia probably a little bit more niche, and I think that you're not going to see it on hardly any killers other than ones that are really good at applying pressure in a lot of places. Thanophobia is still going to be good on Onryo. It's still going to be good on, let's say, Blight, who's very maneuverable. It's still going to be good, obviously, on Plague and Legion. So those survivors that are really good at the macro game, really hitting and running and just constantly applying pressure everywhere, they're still going to get value out of it. Wraith will probably still get some value out of this. So there's still going to be killers that really see value in Thanophobia, but it's going to be a lot less impactful across the board because you do need to get up to that 4th perk slot to really feel a big impact. Otherwise, you're just not getting quite that much out of it, right? But overall, I think that this is good. I think Behavior needed to do something to nerf Thanophobia. I think it was a little too powerful before, because I think you got too much value early on. Now, maybe it'd be nice to have something where it scales a little harder throughout, so the 2nd and 3rd stack feel better, and then the 4th stack feels great, but the 1st stack does very little. So maybe instead of just adding value at the 4th stack, you start seeing it at the 3rd and 4th stack. I think that middle ground would make Thanophobia good on every killer, but then truly great on those killers we mentioned: Wraith, Onryo, Legion, Plague. I think as it is right now, you are going to see a significant drop off. I think Behavior wants to see a significant drop off. And honestly, taking generator repair times from 90 seconds to like 108, 110 seconds, I think is really unhealthy for the game because I think that it slows the game down to a crawl. And I think there are a lot of ways to already enable killers to slow the game down in a really impactful way. And I think that when the killers are slowing the game down a lot, you start seeing survivors being forced to take perks like Prove Thyself, which I strongly believe is going to become meta for survivors in this environment. And then I think that that leads to more unfun because it basically turns into an arms race of, okay, cool. Killers are stacking slowdowns, survivors are stacking prove thyself in toolboxes, and it kind of becomes this very, very unfun arms race that becomes very linear, right? Okay, how much can the killer slow the gens down? How much can the survivors augment and speed those gen repairs up? Um, and what's cool about this is this begins to add things like, hey, having medkits and having one person that can always manage healing themselves, or continuing to bring the boon circle of healing so that people can heal themselves. Empathy again begins to, or self-care, sorry, self-care begins to get some more value, so that there are this this introduces a better way to counter it, and it makes healing a way to counter this perk, and it adds value to healing perks because keeping just one person off really hurts Thanophobia. So overall, it's good. I think that there are some ways I would personally like to see it tweaked a little further, but I think that what we're seeing here and the way that we're seeing it interact here is way better than what we're seeing here. It was weird as a killer and like feeling like Thanophobia was a good pick on like things like Bubba and Hillbilly, which typically aren't injuring a lot of people. You're just going right for downs, and like just feeling like one or two stacks is really impactful seemed really strange. So that's Thanophobia. This is a necessary change. This perk was too strong, and I think that it would have promoted a very unhealthy meta in its current state. So I think that seeing it changed is pretty important. Uh, the next change that we're looking at is Medal of Man. Medal of Man's interesting, and I'm not the expert on this particular one because I don't play Medal of Man very often. This is not a perk that I've ever interacted with a lot. I don't play Ashley J. Williams very often, and I just don't use it. Um, but I've always thought Medal of Man was a very fun perk. I don't think it was a good perk, not in the iterations that I've experienced. I don't think it's ever been a meta perk, but I think it's been a fun perk. And even with the changes to the update, I don't think that Medal of Man was incredibly overpowered by any means. I still think it was always going to be a fun perk with the current work. Um, and the changes here seem interesting. So where I really liked Thanophobia and think it's important, I feel like Medal of Man is getting hit a little hard. So I'm going to read through this a little bit more because I personally don't know Medal of Man as well. Okay, and let's see what behavior has to say. So with endurance status effect updated, with the endurance status effect updated, Medal of Man continues to be an outlier. While it provides a similar effect to endurance, the perk currently does not deactivate when performing a conspicuous action, which just means once you get Medal of Man, you can go do whatever, and then whenever you're ready to cash on it, whenever you're ready to take a hit for a survivor, if you're in a chase with a killer, you just get this extra hit for you, right? This by design is reflected in the perk's description not mentioning endurance. Since activating Medal of Man is so difficult, it wouldn't be fair to lose your heart in protection so easily. We wanted to clear up this inconsistency and give Medal of Man a slight rework while we were at it. Okay, so old Medal of Man, just so we're clear, took 3 protection hits to activate. Then once it activated, um, the next time you took a hit, it would ignore going into the injured or dying state. You basically just get a free hit. And then I believe it's while you're healed and Metal of Man is active. If you're far enough away from the killer sees your aura. So what have they done? Well, now it only takes 2 protection hits to activate Metal of Man. So that's great, okay? That's a pretty significant cut in the amount of time it takes to activate Metal of Man. Whereas before you were maybe getting 1 Metal of Man proc a game, now it's possible to get maybe 2, possibly 3. Um, but Metal of Man is going to be easier to get into the game. You're going to get more use. You're going to see it more consistently, okay? Now, when Metal of Man is activated, you gain access to the endurance status effect. So you are capable of taking another hit. This is really good. This is really valuable. Um, it's more consistent with the game mechanics, and it removes it from being this kind of weird like oddity in the game. Okay, so anytime you can streamline stuff, I think that's good overall. I do really like. There's a part of me that really likes kind of just this uniqueness that you get to experience, where it's like, hey, this is super weird and like kind of special, and like here's this other thing that's weird and special. But making more perks easily digestible and understandable, I think, is also valuable in its own way. I think it's a little less fun, but I think that it's much easier to process what's going on. Okay. So while the endurance status effect is active, your aura will be revealed to the killer when they're further than 12, 14, 16 meters away. I've read this a couple times, and my assumption is that this effect here is only active while Metal of Man is active. So if you say get the endurance status effect when you are unhooked, I'm assuming that as long as Metal of Man isn't active, which it shouldn't be in that state, your aura won't be revealed to the killer. I certainly hope that's the case, and that you don't have just this consistent debuff, because there are a lot of ways to just passively get endurance now. Now this is the part that's a little less fun for me. Like other endurance effects, performing a conspicuous action will cause it to deactivate prematurely, and it will not protect you from entering the dying state if you already have deep wounds. Okay. Um, why don't I like this? I think one of the problems I see, and one of the problems I'm seeing with the increase of endurance, things like this, things like off the record, is that it feels like for survivors to be successful in this game, survivors have to be aggressive on generators. You need survivors who are hitting the generators, really working through them, because they have just a baseline increased time now. Killers have more way to damage and regress them than they did before, and so it's just in general harder for survivors to get generators done. And as you continue to increase perks that only give you value when you're not working on generators, I think that it gets very, very challenging for survivors to complete gens. Because let's say you have somebody with off the record, let's say you have somebody who's trying to stack Metal of Man. If you have people that are kind of playing around these perks, yes, you have a lot of harassment around the killer. You have a lot of people who are pressuring the killer, but the more of these perks that only give you value when you're not doing conspicuous actions, which includes repairing generators, the fewer survivors you're going to have actively repairing generators. That extends the length of the game, and it turns these perks from being these really cool things you can get this really nice value out of when the time is appropriate, to perks that you're kind of forced to use um, when you get them. And you can't just like go off, be productive somewhere else, and then be like, oh, this is the opportunity where I want Metal of Man. Okay, I was working on a generator, I was doing valuable things for my team, and now I'm going to go run because there's one of my friends is in chase, they're in trouble, they're close enough that I can go help them out. I'm going to take this protection hit with Metal of Man. I'm going to get them out of the chase. It's going to be great. Now it's like, okay, cool. The killer just hit me. I just took my protection hit and I'm injured. Metal of Man is active and I have endurance. Awesome. I have to use that now. Right. I can't do anything else useful in the game right now except for take another hit from the killer. I have to make sure that the killer hits me again, and then I'm just in chase with the killer from there, right? It buys my team time, so there is value in that. But I am now pigeonholed. If I'm going to get value out of this perk, I am now pigeonholed into doing something very specific that is not progressing the game state. It is simply buying time. And if I don't do that, then I've essentially given up a perk slot, and I have to take 2 more protection hits in order to get access to this perk again. Um, and like down here they mentioned that, so right, it's forcing the survivor to make the choice between saving their Metal of Man and working on generators. Um, and yes, it's easier to activate, but I don't know that making it easier to activate helps with this dilemma that you're putting survivors in. You're kind of forcing them into. I think that overall, I think that Metal of Man should remain active regardless of if you're doing a conspicuous action or not. In most cases, it's tough too, right? Does somebody, because they got a Metal of Man stack, should they be able to run up to a generator that's, let's say, 90%, 95%, and know that they can finish it because the killer's going to hit them, they're going to ignore it, they can go stick the gen, and then maybe the killer downs them, but they guarantee a gen state? Like, that starts to get a little fuzzy. But as this is the way that it works now, I don't like it. I don't like anything that is really forcing you to not be able to progress the game state by repairing generators. I think this makes Metal of Man pretty unhealthy. I think this makes Off the Record pretty unhealthy. And I think it promotes a style of gameplay that I'm not personally a big fan of. So I'm a little sad by this particular change because I think it takes a really cool, interesting perk, and I think it makes it less interesting in a way that for me isn't as fun. So while I appreciate the consistency that's being added, and I think that it's easier to understand what Medal of Man is and how it works than it was before, I appreciate that it's easier to use. This is still just not very good, in my opinion. I would be happy to kind of see this changed and see the value change, um, but it seems weird. This also, especially if I see this aura on them and know that they have Medal of Man, because when are you taking protection hits? Let's talk about that. So oftentimes you're taking protection hits when you are trying to get another friend who probably has multiple hook states. You're typically doing that because your friend is in trouble and you need to get them out. You need to get them out. You need to take aggro. And if I'm a killer and I hit a survivor who has 0 hooks and I have a survivor that I'm chasing that has 2 hooks, right? I will typically, in most cases, unless I'm really late in the game and I need to get people out, I'll typically pick up that other chase and I'll go for that other person. Okay? But if they get far enough away with the speed boost that they're able to make and the things they're able to do, if they get far enough away and I see that Medal of Man is active, there's no reason for me to continue chasing them, right? There is less value in me going after somebody who has Medal of Man when I could keep going for their friend who doesn't have it, and I could just down again, and I could progress that. And so it disincentivizes me as a killer who's trying to make sure that I'm not tunneling. It disincentivizes me from going for this person, this Medal of Man player, and it incentivizes me to go for the person that I was chasing initially, and that reduces the the value of Medal of Man because I'm going to try to ignore this person. Now, walking through this myself and thinking about it, and I apologize for the rambling, that does mean that the person can then run up and kind of still harass and be around and do the conspicuous action, or and get value out of Medal Man without doing the conspicuous action because now they can take another hit for their friend. So maybe the reality is that Medal of Man is good. It is important because the survivor can essentially take 2 hits for their friend instead of one. Um, but I think that you need to very consciously play around that. And now that I say this more, like that seems okay. Honestly, that seems fine. It does. It'll be interesting. I want to see this played. I actually want to play this and I want to test this now. I want to see how it feels. Um, maybe this is an answer to a problem that I'm seeing in general, which is that it feels like with the slowdown of the game, in order for a survivor group to do well, it feels like every survivor needs to be able to loop well. It feels like if you have one survivor that couldn't loop well in previous games because of the generator speed, because of this 80-90 change, it felt like even with a couple weaker loopers, if the killer picked the wrong survivor to chase and that survivor could loop really well, it felt like you could see 2 generators done before you get that survivor on hook. And occasionally you run into those swifts that are all really good, and all 4 generators are just finished in no time, right? And you're down to your last gen, and you got 1 hook, and it feels terrible. With the change in generators repair time, it felt like you needed essentially every survivor needs to be good at looping, and every survivor needs to eat time on the killer. And if the killer finds just 1 or even 2 people that are bad at looping, um, the game goes sideways really, really quickly because the survivors aren't kind of grabbing the killer's attention from generators long enough to enable the other survivors in the group to be able to finish generators. This still pulls survivors away from generators, which survivors really want to be focused on gens, but it looks like there is a decent chunk of value in this particular perk. Um, I personally hate that um, the deep wounds thing is a real feels bad against killers like Legion in particular, who can already apply deep wounds. I understand that certain killers will always have counters to abilities, but it feels really bad as somebody who still uses Dead Hard pretty frequently that if I get Frenzy hit by a Legion, my Dead Hard is just worthless. Um, and so Medal of Man against Legion is going to be essentially useless. Not that it would be particularly great, but that's one other just kind of weird thing. So as I talk about it more, as I look at this, I'm not as doom and gloom as I was when I first started going through this talk to myself situation, but I do worry I do worry about it. I think that I'm more open to the idea that it could actually be much better than I'm giving it credit for, but we'll just have to see. We'll have to wait and see. This is something that I do plan on trying a lot more and testing out a lot more, and I'm probably going to level up Ashley next just to get this out there, because taking 2 protection hits is something that I think I can do. I think that I'm a decent looper, and I think that if you're somebody who is decent at looping the killer, and you play with friends, and some of your friends are not as strong at looping, and they don't like it or they try to avoid it, I think that being able to pick up Metal of Man, being able to activate it relatively easily, will really give you the chance to help alleviate some of the pressure from some of your friends who aren't as strong at looping, and give you the opportunity to help buy them time and give them more opportunities to loop. So I think that you might see probably one person. Like if you're playing with a Swift, I'd probably have one person with Metal of Man. I'd have this be the person that feels really comfortable looping. I would probably pair this with either a Circle of Healing or play with somebody who has Circle of Healing, or just somebody who really is skilled at healing. There's a particular person in our community who loves Autodidact. Dragon, I'm talking to you. And this would be a really good perk to pair with an autodidact person who you take your protection hit, you run away, autodidact heals you up really quickly. You get back in there, you take another hit, autodidact heals you up really quickly. And then you just kind of get this value, and then you kind of force the killer to acknowledge your presence, and you buy your friends who are a little bit weaker at looping more time. I think there is a place for it. I do think there is a place for it now that I say this. I'm done talking about this though. This is interesting. Give it a look, give it a test. If you're a strong looper, definitely check it out and see if it can't help you buy some of your friends who are not as strong at looping or not as comfortable looping. See if it can buy them some more time. I think that there is a world now with the lower threshold to pick it up where you can really bug killers and annoy them, and I like that part. So the last one is interesting. So, Pain Resonance, Merciless Storm, and Dead Man Switch. I'm going to read through these really quickly. I remember them, but I've got so much of the Metal of Man conversation that like my mind has already flushed out any information on this. Okay, so Pain Resonance was changed such that it no longer forces survivors to momentarily stop repairing the generator. This effectively prevented the perk from activating Dead Man Switch on its own. The killer would need to chase them off the generator manually. Okay. Now we've talked back in the July update about how amazing Scourge Hook Pain Resonance was, and it was a genuinely overpowered perk. It provided way too much value. My concern during the July update is that the nerf, which just caused the regression but nothing else, was maybe a little too weak. It maybe made it a little too weak. Maybe it over nerfed it. Um, this is the part that's interesting. However, this change caused an unexpected combination to appear. Since this new version allowed survivors to continue working on the generator, Merciless Storm, which procs at 90% of generator progress the first time a generator hits 90%, would continue spawning excessive amounts of skill checks, nearly 40, after the generator regresses. So Merciless Storm, the first time a generator gets to 90%, survivors are hit with a continuous stream of skill checks for that generator until the generator is completed, or until one survivor fails a skill check. When a survivor fails a skill check, the generator is blocked for a certain number of seconds. Okay. Scourge Hook Pain Res could take a generator that let's say it's just crossed over the 90% threshold, and you start getting those skill checks. Pain Resonance hits. You are still working on that generator, you still have the skill checks, but now it's lost 16% of its progress. So you're down to 84% progress. But this Merciless Storm is still active. So instead of Merciless Storming from 90 to 100, you're now doing whatever time you made there, you go back down, and you have to do it for another 16% of generator progress, more than doubling the amount of time you need to go through Merciless Storm, right? And so this became pretty scary. Like this combo is very nice if you could get lucky to have the timing down, right? This isn't something that killers get to plan for. It's not something they get to know they're getting. But if you get lucky, you can give the survivors a really bad time. So this is what's interesting. To remedy this, we are restoring Pain Resonance's generator interruption. Though the killer will not receive a notification, this will cause Merciless Storm to no longer combo with Pain Res. Yes and no. So what this means is that survivors are no longer forced to do a ton of skill checks. However, because the survivor is now leaving the generator, they're taking their hands off the generator, they just automatically feral Merciless Storm. So yes, they're not being forced to do as many skill checks, which means that they're less likely to fail, they're less likely to cause an additional explosion and get more aggression, but you're also denying them that opportunity altogether. And so it's just going to automatically get wrapped up by the entity because they will have failed Merciless Storm by getting off the generator. Um, and so it's interesting that, like, instead of giving somebody the opportunity, we're just hard saying that they failed and Merciless Storm is still getting value. So you're not really stopping this, you're just changing how it affects survivors. You're still getting a combo value out of this, but I don't know, it's weird. It's weird. What this means is that it reintroduces Pain Resonance and Dead Man Switch. So the way that these two combo, Dead Man Switch, when a survivor gets hooked, Dead Man Switch activates. And as long as it's active, whenever a survivor gets off of a generator, whether it's failing a skill check or just walking away, that generator is blocked for all survivors for, I think it was like 40, 45 seconds before this update. So what they're doing, because they are reintroducing this combo, is that they're reducing Dead Man Switch's value. Um, it is interesting to nerf one perk on its own because of how it interacts in combos with the secondary perk. It's unavoidable ultimately because especially harder to the painkillers are going to use this combo, and really, like, I would say it's very rare to use Dead Man's Switch before the July update and not also use Pain Res. Like, these two are always going together. Um, it's just a little bit of a feels bad because it feels like, for me, I would take Dead Man's Switch just for fun because I think it's a cool, interesting perk that can give you some value, especially as you approach generators, because survivors that would normally hide and do things are like forced to give you info. So there's still situations where it's valuable on its own. Um, but now with the nerf, with it being weaker, and it's not awful, 30 seconds is still a lot of time for a generator to be blocked that a survivor is working on, and you still get info. It's just weird to me to see something nerfed because it's specifically locked in with another perk because these two go together so frequently. I think it's important. I think it's essential. I'm just personally a little sad that we're getting a nerf to something like Deadman Switch specifically because they're buffing Pain Res. It feels like if I take Deadman Switch or if I want to play around Deadman Switch, it feels like I have to have Pain Res. And I don't like when I have four choices, I don't like one choice necessitating a second choice, right? I don't like to feel like I have to take this other perk to pair with the first one because they combo well. It feels like it limits my flexibility as a killer. I understand, I get it. I think this is necessary, um, but I don't know that I love that the Dead Man Switch is getting hit because they decided to rebuff Pain Res, which I initially thought where they're taking Pain Res right now as part of the July update, I thought this is what it needed to be. I thought that it needed to move survivors off the generator, or you needed an indicator, just something. I thought that it needed a little bit more than just the regression. Um, but I think that it honestly is probably okay on its own. I think that the 16% regression is actually pretty potent. You're still looking at like like 13 something seconds of generator regression just for this, which is pretty impactful and still gives the killer a chance to go find that generator. You won't know which one it is, but it still gives you the opportunity to go find that generator, and it does still slow survivors down. So Scourge Hook Pain Res still feels better than I think I expected it to. I don't really love not giving survivors the opportunity to finish the gen with Merciless Storm. You just make them auto fail, and therefore, because they're auto failing, this is getting the tendrils. The killer sees the tendrils, so the killer now knows where it is. I think what you may actually see is like these three taken together with like a slowdown perk or something like that, like these three with a Thanophobia even nerfed on the right killer, just something like that. This is weird. This is where we're getting to a point in Dead by Daylight where there are so many perks and so many perk interactions that you can't just be like, hey, this one is strong, let's nerf it. We're going to start, I think, seeing more of this trickle effect where it's like, okay, cool, we're going to adjust Pain Resonance. But Pain Resonance combos with these perks. And because it combos with these perks, this interaction between Pain Res and Merciless Storm needs to be fixed in a certain way. Therefore, we need to adjust this. And if this continues, I'm worried that you're going to see it continue to expand out, and it's gonna hit a point where it feels like it's probably not incredibly sustainable. It's going to take time, obviously, right? The time when Deathslinger came out, Painter's is what artist, and the Merciless Storm is unreal. Like these were all released pretty far away from each other, and to develop the interaction took a lot of time. But as you get more and more perks, you're going to get more and more interaction stacking, and it's going to require that perks can't just be nerfed in kind of isolation of themselves. Like this is too strong, let's bring the percentage down. It's going to be okay. This is nerfed. How does this affect these other perks? Let's make sure that everything stays balanced. This is going to be an interesting thing to see how the devs respond to it. I'll be curious to see how they choose to kind of continue to address this in the future. Ultimately, I don't, like I said, I don't love it, but it's not a big deal. I think that getting this interaction back on a certain level is cool. Like that's kind of neat for me because I did like it. Um, I'm just a little sad that this is getting nerfed as a result. But killers are already in a really strong spot. Killers are in a great place right now. We have a lot of cool extra tools in our tool belt. We're doing much, much better. So I get it. Um, I'll be curious to play this and kind of mess around with it a little bit more as well. Overall, even though I haven't been super excited, I know in a lot of this video, like I haven't been super like thrilled. I'm glad that we're still seeing changes. I'm glad that they're adjusting. I'm glad that they're moving things around. I'm really happy that Thanophobia is getting nerfed. I think that it's not a fun perk to have, and I think that it's creating an unhealthy environment. So this is fantastic. The more I talk about Metal of Man, the more I'm like, maybe this is going to be interesting. This might be pretty cool. And then this is just me complaining. I mean, that's what it is, right? Um, I'm glad to see that when they see problematic things, that they're trying to address them. I don't necessarily know that I think this is the right way to do it, but I'm glad to see that they're identifying this is a problem that we're seeing in games. We're getting feedback that this is an issue. We're going to do something to adjust it. And even if this isn't the adjustment that I want to see or the adjustment that maybe other people want to see, the fact that they're seeing these problems and they're addressing them is a good thing. So I'm excited about that. Finally, we know that the clown is kill switched. We'll see how long he's out for. Um, I don't play clown a lot. I don't particularly love the clown. I do have the Mr. Puddles outfit, which, I'm a little sad that I can't run around as a murder elephant, but it is what it is. And then Orange Glyphs, like, again, just happy to see feedback is being provided and they're listening to feedback. They basically saw some people are getting motion sickness from the kind of glow effect around the outside, as far as I can tell. So, like, cool, we're going to change it up, make it more approachable and more inviting for people. So I really like that. I actually think the orange glyph idea is cool. It's kind of like getting to play on hard mode. I'd almost like to be able to turn it on myself, just like if I'm feeling like that extra challenge. But there it is. And then matchmaking incentives, they basically told us that, hey, that 100% bonus was just always active for survivors, which caused survivor queue problems. Honestly, like real talk, I would nope, that's wrong. Never mind. I'm excited to see this come back. I think that letting people know where and how they can get extra blood points, and hopefully incentivizing people to play both sides of the game a little bit more, I think is very good and very healthy for the game. So I'm excited to see this back. It won't be coming out with this patch, just so we're clear. But this is where we are. So overall, again, just happy to see them working on changes, kind of moving things about. I think the one thing that I would like to see, if you're looking at like what's on Cab's wish list, I want to see Prove Thyself nerfed for survivors, and I want to see some of that value maybe become a little bit more baseline. I don't know. I see why survivors are using Prove Thyself, um, but I feel like Prove Thyself, and I will continue to say this, I feel like Prove Thyself was a problematic perk before the July update. I kind of give it a little bit of a pass because I think survivors need some help. Um, but I think that you're going to see every competitive Swift running to Prove Thyself, and you're going to essentially have people pairing up to try to crush generators. Um, so I will be interested to see if or when Behavior does anything about Prove Thyself. I think it's necessary to have some things that help survivors progress the game, especially when you're introducing more perks that want survivors to get value out of them by not doing generators. But we'll just see. That's all I got for right now. We're 40 minutes. This is way longer than I expected it to be, and it always will be. I appreciate you. If you've gotten to this point, thank you for listening to me ramble on, and really probably go nowhere. I'll talk about these, and hopefully as I go, we'll get better at them. This is the second one that I've discussed. We talked about July, or we talked through the June update, I suppose. Um, And yeah, hopefully these smooth out. Hopefully I get a little bit better analyzing and going through this. I just wanted to get something out there for YouTube. If you were enjoying the content, and for those of you wondering, I don't think I made it on screen very much. I'm just literally holding a duster playing with it. Um, if you're enjoying this content, please consider liking and subscribing. It means a lot to me. I'm really trying to grow the YouTube channel and develop it and make it better. That's all I have for right now. I'm going to throw that outro up there. I hope you have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll see you on Twitch. My Twitch link is down in the description. Feel free to click it. I'm live every day, but Saturdays and Tuesdays. And have a wonderful day. Thank you. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This is Cabinaroo. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing. You can find me on Twitch or the next video.